Lesson 8.7, Video 1. This video is going to be a brief introduction to what this lesson is about. And there's two things being covered: the discriminant and complex numbers. The discriminant is merely a part of the quadratic equation. So the quadratic equation is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. That's the quadratic equation. The discriminant is the part inside the root. And that number, when you calculate b squared minus 4ac with the appropriate values, that number tells you how many and what kind of solutions you'll have. So for example, if you have, and again we'll get into this later in greater detail, but based on that number inside the root, you'll have two reals or two real solutions, one real solution, or two imaginary solutions. And we'll talk about what that means later in the lesson. So again, we're not going to be asked to calculate what the solutions are. We're just using the number that would be inside the root, and we're not rooting. We're just looking at the number itself, and from that number we'll be able to decide how many solutions we would get and what kind of solutions they would be, but not exactly what the solutions are. The second part of the lesson deals with complex numbers. And complex numbers have a real part and an imaginary part. Now, a real part would be any number that we usually talk about, but an imaginary number comes about when we have a root of a negative number. We cannot root a negative number on our calculators. It gives us an error, but we can, notation-wise, go further. And we're going to, again, talk in greater detail on this, but basically, root of negative 4, I can root 4 and I get 2, but that negative becomes an I, and that's the imaginary part, notation-wise. So a complex number would be a number that would have a real part, so let's say 4, and I would add or subtract, depending upon what the problem is, an imaginary number. So this would be considered an example, so 4 plus 2i of a complex number. So a real part and an imaginary part. And again, we'll talk about that in greater detail later. So this ends Lesson 8.7, Video 1, a brief introduction to the lesson.